Evening all. Welcome to the Dominance Dialogues. I'm Rope Aficionado, and tonight we have Knights of the Mist, and our discussion is going to be based on collaboration, power of teamwork. Give Knights of the Mist the opportunity. Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Uh, I'm a retired gentleman for past year and a half. Retired originally from my career at 48. I've
Wait one second.
have
Hold on a second. We have someone saying no sound.
oh
Okay, some other people are having sound. Um, so Dr. Bob, Red Warrior, you might have to click unmute. Yep. So, Mark, can we go ahead and start back for the people that didn't have sound for a second?
yeah. My name's Mark. I'm retired for the past couple of years. Originally retired from my career when I was 48. I've been with two ladies living together for about 17 years. Uh, they're my uh, slaves. That's how we began. One of them, Alandra, is also my wife, which we consider a role, not a for the purpose of society. We've been together since 1987. Uh, I've got a long career in management and leadership, along with my authority dynamic, power and authority dynamic that I've had with Alandra pretty well from the beginning. Our relationship began in 1987. That's about it.
You said you have two girls. When did the relationship with your other girl start?
Yes, they're both my slaves. Kyra is actually going on 19 years this April when our relationship began. It began as a long distance relationship. She's originally from South Florida and moved up from South Florida to northern Alberta. Uh, I wanted to move there to the sun, but she preferred the snow and the cold. So she's a little nuts. There's no question about that. And yeah, that relationship was a master slave relationship right from the beginning as well.
Um, Sounds like you have decades of experience when it comes to leader-follower relationship.
Both in my professional career and personal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's why I wanted to have you on as a guest. Not to say it lightly, um, I'm almost a little bit envious of your ability to create such long-term lasting relationships, something that is not that common. And when we first crossed paths, I was like, I don't know what I need to learn from him. There might be at least one or two things. And I've been very fortunate that we've been able to share space over the last, I don't know, year or two and have had some private conversations. Um, so I do appreciate having you on. Um, so we're just gonna go ahead and start diving into the topic. So obviously the topic is collaboration, and this is something that you spurred in one of our dinner discussions. Um, how you don't negotiate, you collaborate. I think that was probably the first time I reached out to you privately, asking if we could have a meeting discussing how you different terms. So, for the sake of the public, would you mind elaborating how you differentiate between negotiation and collaboration, specifically for leader-follower relationships?
Uh, Fundamentally, negotiation and collaboration is the difference between one having two entities, negotiation, and me and you, while collaboration is three entities, the me, you, and us. The only difference in is that the me and you have to speak for the us. And to do that, we have to define what the us is.
Like how you frame it in the three different, you like compartmentalize it in different layers. And I think that that is a big part in collaboration work, or that quality. But much as I want to adopt this word more, my leader follower relationship, sometimes I've struggled. And so I think what I've come to, at least for what makes sense, is I want to collaborate, but before I can collaborate, I got to negotiate. Negotiation is like the precursor to collaborate. I got to negotiate to see if I even want to collaborate, for instance. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, Collaboration is, in essence, just another style of negotiation. The negotiation is of a variety of different styles. When you think of negotiation, when you go into a store to buy your car, you're basically acting on a competitive negotiation or uh, distributive negotiation, and you're trying to get most value and giving up the least amount of value. When you're talking about in the context of a relationship, you're not really negotiating necessarily. You're beginning in a discovery process to see, do you want to collaborate with this person? Negotiation, if you go into negotiation, you're actually going to start to make agreements or working towards agreements, whether it's collaboratively or competitively. But in the initial stages, there's that point where you're going to a discovery process. Can I come up with an agreement with this person? When I went into and bought a vehicle, before I even decided whether I wanted to negotiate, I had to decide whether I liked the salesman. Was his energy right for me? Did he talk to me as a person or just as a wallet for his pocketbook? And so I think it's important to make that distinction of the phase, that there's that discovery process first before you go into negotiation. The other thing about negotiating and collaborative that might help people understand, negotiation to me is much more transactional. It's an exchange, while a collaboration is an integration process where their needs, like Alandra and Kyra, for example, become my needs. My needs become their needs. We
Powerful.
integrate ourselves. It's and then we start in collaboration in the process of creating the us. We start talking as us. We need this. We need to do this. And that's part of style of leadership, a collaborative leadership approach. You speak as part of a team rather than as a perspective of the boss.
So I'm gonna ah, circle back a little bit, and it sounded, please correct me if I'm wrong, that to some level before what most would start as negotiation, where like someone sits down and figures out what transaction take place. Sounded like to me for you, collaboration happens before you even sat down. It sounded like starts when you meet that person, when you like going back to the car salesman. Are they pushy? Are they not pushy? Are they actually interested in what you want?
I, not so much that I am trying to develop a collaboration, but I'm trying to assess whether collaboration is possible.
Mm,
I learn that a person that comes in with a transactional mindset in a follower leader dynamic is not going to go into a collaborative process. Now, why they don't, there's a lot of different possibilities and reasons why people don't go there. It might not be who they are. It might not. The big thing about collaboration is they have to buy in into the process, into the vision. One of the When I first came across Kyra online, as we started to learn who each other was as people, long before we even put on the table that we were going to have an intimate relationship, we started to understand who each other was. And I shared with her how Alandra and I live our life and our vision of us, what us as a vision, which was the two are one. We are the us, if you will. And our litmus test in all the decisions and events in our life, from the day to day, our actions is all about what's best for us. So when I'm making a decision, that is the ultimate litmus test. Is this good for us? Is this the best avenue for us? One of the things that I have found very prominent in the lifestyle community in regards to power dynamics is there's a very authoritarian command and control mentality. And and I've seen it in its worst form. It's all about the master, all about the leader, and the follower is supposed to totally adapt to everything to the master leader. And I feel that is has huge potential for abuse and fundamentally has deep long-term well-being issues.
that really makes me want to jump to a question I have later, but I'm not. So I'm gonna try to stay more on track. I'm trying to get good at this, guys. I'm working out the kinks. Fun
I applaud
completely.
your self-discipline.
Thank you, thank you. Um, but because it leads me into two different places I wanted to potentially take this conversation. First one I think is more important is what are some of the biggest challenges that we face as we try to build these leader what are some of the biggest challenges that people face when they're trying to create long-term leader-follower relationship?
In one word, three letters, ego.
Do you wanna say that again in case someone missed that?
Ego. Not Lego, though they hurt when you step on them. And it hurts the ego when you step on it as well. Uh, One of the things that I think is very important with any person in a position of authority or power over one, two, a group, a company, whatever it is, it's very important to appreciate the corruptive influence that power can have. It is very well researched by a lot of different people. There's books about it that power in people's hands can change how they look at things. It can change their perspectives. Uh, and there, my favorite study that I've come across is called the Cookie Monster study. Essentially, take three people and they put them in a room and they give them an assignment and they assign one person arbitrarily, no rhyme or reason why that person, and then they watch them for a while. But the real experiment came later as they worked for a while, and they brought in a plate of 4 cookies. 66 roughly percent of the time, the leader took that extra cookie. And there's other studies where they've been able to validate that people in position of power or perceived power are can be negatively influenced. And I really just want to stress the word can be on the power. They can, feel they have this entitlement action and behavior. And I see it play out in relationship dynamics as well. And my personal feeling is that because these relationships are so very intimate and the dogma feeds this mindset, they go down this destructive rabbit hole rather rapidly of allowing this process, and people's before you know it they're in an unhealthy dynamic. One of the keys that I have found is that I've learned that is very effective in minimizing the influence that power has on people is mindfulness, gratefulness, generosity, being a generous person, not with the hopes of getting anything return, but just giving of yourself. Uh, and there's and the big thing is to keep you self-aware. Empathy, sitting down and listening and seeking to feel what your follower is feeling.
Wasn't really on there, kind of logical follow-up. What are some things that, um, mitigate some of these challenges?
Well, like I said, all these different skills is to do the work to understand how to use them. Uh, we live in a very me society, and we live in a very fast food, convenient society. We want it now. We're impatient. But all these skills take time to develop. And I would suggest to anyone that's on this journey to just keep moving, keep trying. Um, and the book that you shared with me here that I've almost halfway through already uh, has this, and it's very true, 1% incremental improvements on several different things can have huge exponential effects a year down the road, 2 years down the road. You might not be good at doing gratitude today, but if you do it a little bit and you keep trying to do just a little bit more, uh, there's that quote uh, every 1,000 miles you start with that first step, and you just got to keep taking the steps to get to that 1,000 miles.
Well, think I heard it on Chris Williamson's podcast, Modern Wisdom, that I really liked. That it was Krister's guest, but it was said that trajectory is more important than position, right?
Hmm.
And that's speaking from my own experience when it comes to like rope specific, because obviously a big part of my life. At some point, I felt like I plateaued. Wait a second, there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to know, and I think it's really important that whether it's rope or leader follower relationships, to understand that it's a pebble at a time. It takes, I can only speak from left side of the slash. I identify as a master, and I can speak my side that it's taken a lot of time, personal development in myself before I felt that I could accept that role into someone else's life. And it's that 1%. Right? Now I'm almost polished, right? But then when I speak with people like you and other people that we know, wait a sec, I still have so much room to grow. And I imagine you probably have some people that know you um not look up to, but see massive growth for you yourself, even though you've been in this lifestyle since the 1987.
There is no question that, and maybe this is a problem in the sense or problematic, is we're always looking for that smarter person, that more experienced person. But the truth is, everybody has the possibility to learn something from anybody else. And looking for that more experienced, more knowledgeable person is almost buying into this lack of patience because they got all that wisdom. And so I don't have to, I just have this person and I got a better chance to learning a whole bunch quickly and maybe more efficiently. But maybe what I actually need to learn is from that brand new person in of their lifestyle is they have a little gold nugget perspective that I forgot. And sometimes we need to be reminded about where we began.
Um, do people pose new questions, ways that we haven't thought of as well? It offers different perspective, and there's a comment in the like, and they attended a discussion where someone who has been in the community for many years suggested getting a younger, newer person as their mentor. I think that that is alluding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, to the you can learn from something from every.
I think one of the problems, and I seen it in my career, I see it in the lifestyle of people that's been around a long time. We get into this blinder mentality. We we think we've seen it all, and we discard things without out of our biases. But things have changed, and one of the things that I very much appreciate when I sit back and I listen to people, younger people like yourself, uh, other people even younger in the lifestyle, younger in life, uh, they remind me of things. The other thing is they look at things a lot differently today than I did when I was their age because society is a lot different too. I entered the workforce when there were no cell phones, there were no computers. You know, what social media was going to the local pool hall and shooting pool with my friends. That was social media, which is where I met Alandra.
Well, it seems like that was a good place to go at the time.
Well, it was a lot of fun, especially when you watch this cute girl bending over a table.
That goes in slightly different, but on my social media, I've been asked a lot, like, how do you? And we constantly get told like FetLife or dating apps or this, that, or the other. Sometimes you get recommended to go to a dungeon or in-person events, which I do see value there. But for me, as I've looked back through my journey, various relationships I've had, some of my best relationships started from those real life experiences. I was just at a pool hall playing pool. I had no plans of finding a slave or a girlfriend or an anything. I was just there to play pool and, call it law of attraction, if you will. The stars aligned or whatever. But big thing that I talk about here is focus on character more than experience or desire, especially like for a master seeking an S type, because a slave can gain experience over time, right? Character matters more than anything. Um, so going to that, if you don't mind,
Completely
Brian,
agree.
what was that?
I completely agree. Character matters.
If you don't mind me prying a little bit, um, once you met Alandra, imagine, like the idea of leader follower relationship didn't pop in right away or anything like that. You mind like maybe giving us a 30,000-foot view on maybe that first couple months of your interactions on how you guys establish repertoire and relationship?
Um, gosh, really, for the first, I think maybe 6 months, it was just about spending time together. Uh, we were young, like she was literally like a couple months from 17 when I met her. I was 21, and it's not the first time we actually saw each other. It was several years before that when she just about ran me over with a trike. So I didn't know it was her at the time when I met her person for the first time. But in the beginning, it was just discovering each other. No big talks, no real conversations of, we want to be a master slave, leader, follower, whatever language you want to use. It was a very fluid and organic beginning. What really kind of turned the tables is I was sitting on her bed and she was cleaning, doing some cleaning, and she opened up her whole chest that her grandfather made. And it was two levels, and across the top level were all these books. And they were obviously special to her because she had books everywhere. But these were they were all of one series. They were gore books. And I say that like with the quotation marks. And she was taking them out, and I picked one up, and I just kind of like double take on it because the first page was this scantily clad, well shaped looking woman. And, I think there was a collar and all that kind of, you know, pop art kind of thing at the time. And I'm sitting there, what the heck is this? And that's when she started talking to me in a more intimate way of what these books were, how she related to them, and so I started reading it. After about maybe maybe 2 pages, I don't think I got to the third. I just kind of, oh my God, the writing is horrible. I couldn't stand the writing. But the concept really kind of tantalized me. It perked my instincts, if you will. And we just started interacting very, we allowed ourselves to be who we were. And our sex became a bit rougher. Uh, I still remember to this day, uh, we had a very intense, not of that time for us, and she told me, "You really know how to fuck a woman." And, I'm 21. She was the first woman I've ever been with, and it was like, talk about ego going sky high, and it was kind of freeing. Not just kind of, it was. And I accidentally tripped on uh, a concept I learned years later uh, by Carl Rogers, a psychologist, which is essentially congruence. The more you are able to manifest your inner self with your real self in demonstrated behavior and such, the more happier, content, fulfilled, healthier well being, and all that sort of thing. The further away you move your real self from your ideal self, the more problematic it becomes. Now, we're never perfectly real self to ideal self. But what I found in those early months with Alandra, we were getting our some self-awareness of who we were as individuals, and we were able to be together and be our real selves and closer to that. And there was a real sense of contentment, not happiness, contentment. And that's really how it took off.
I would not have expected your partner that um
Yeah, I was a good Catholic boy. I was actually thinking of going into the priesthood before I met her. True story.
interesting. Well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit more of your personal experience because that is pretty personal. Getting your guys' that a big takeaway I personally got from was I throw out some keywords there, like the patience. You guys were patient. You it sounded like you guys focused more on each other's character because well, you didn't even know any more than that. And it sounds you I'm just gonna go back to patient. I think that is a big rush in modern culture is in the famous words of a near and dear friend of mine, when content is cheap, attention is expensive. And I think about that often, and I think that has a great impact on our relationship. So, such in a rush. You're probably not super aware with the dating apps and how easy it is just to swipe or this, that, or the other, or get access, or, I mean, FetLife, the same thing. How easy it is to find these transactions almost instead of finding the person.
I think the other thing, and this is where it's a lot different today than it was 30 some years ago, because of the internet and social media. There's labels coming out the yin yang, in this lifestyle. They got a label for everything. And everybody's trying to put themselves into a box. We're trying to categorize this person, that person, me, you, and what label is that? What is a slave? What is a master? What is a puppy? What is this? What is that? We're so busy looking for these labels, we're not looking inside of ourselves and doing the introspection work and the self awareness who we are without labels and just being. And when Alandra and I began, we just be us. We, and it was actually when I started going in and learning all this stuff that I went down a lot of blind alleys thinking that's the way it was supposed to go. And I come out and I just left the neighborhood. Not to condemn or critique any people that present or write books and all that, because I think it's really important. But my greatest learning has been outside of the lifestyle, not in it. You can see behind me all these books. There's not a single lifestyle book on that shelf. There's a few hundred books that I have. And my lifestyle book is in my cottage, which is my play space and dungeon where the ladies are sitting in right now. It's about that big on the shelf, like I can pick them up and yeah, there's some very good books, but they are primers. They help you start thinking, but the skills you need to succeed are not going to come from those books. Internalization for the slave, I did not find, and the process of how to work through it. I found that through a theory called self determination theory by a couple gentlemen who developed that theory years ago. Uh, Building self esteem, you know, I went, my favorite book for that is The Six Pillars of Self Esteem by Nathaniel Branden, often considered in his field the father and the premier of that field. I think people need to do the work. If you need to learn about mindfulness, go do the work to find people that that's their passion. That's how they live. That's how they make their living. Uh, is practicing and developing these skills. You want to learn about how to build self-esteem. There's tons of professionals that have done research. You want to learn how power affects you. Well, just today, I came across a research paper. It's about 60 pages, and I've got to go through it all. But what really caught me is how people in power are more likely to use collaborative approaches than those not in power, which I found interesting. I still got to go through it. It also had this caveat: as long as the person's power is not challenged, that's how people in power are more than willing to collaborate, because they don't feel threatened. And I think a lot of follower leader relationships end up into crisis mode at the worst, failure, or at the very least troubled waters, because they don't know how to navigate when the authority and the power within the dynamic is challenged or questioned by the follower, slave, submissive, what have you. In actual fact, from my perspective, it's deeply important that they have that ability. In my professional experience, in my work career and my life career, I never get better staying in my comfort zone. I only get better when I'm challenged to be better. And that's one of the important roles that Alandra and Kyra have given me over the years. Besides my own quest to be better, as you can see with all the books I've read and that I go back to and read again over again and everything, they give me insight that I can't see without their help. And, like we have a kind of a little game we play where I'm perfect. I never make mistakes because, I'm the master, right? I don't make mistakes. Haven't you read the divine right of kings? Well, Alandra reminded me, I think it was last night, you were wrong that that was mom's car. You said it wasn't. We were I quickly recovered, though. That wasn't we weren't looking at the same car. It was the only car parked there, but we were looking at different ones.
think there is some importance to maybe like dive into a little bit that no matter who you are, no matter what your role is, we're all fallible. And I think for me as a person, I have learned to appreciate my failures more so than my successes because my failures I use as an opportunity to learn how to repeat myself. If I happen to just fall into success and you ask me to repeat it again, I'd never be able to do it. If I fail enough times, I learn what not to do or enough of what not to do that I can more readily repeat. I think that sometimes there is pedestal that a master is put on or a leader is put on. Um, how how do you I want to frame this question. When you, as a human or as a leader, make a mistake inside of your relationship, how do you navigate that? How do you stay off of that pedestal? Because you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna make failures wrong.
It really depends on what the mistake is and the impact it has. You know, I get teased by this by the ladies. When Kyra would come up to visit, and we actually still lived in Edmonton in the very beginning at the time. Uh, she would come, and then I would drive her to the airport. Well, the first time she came to visit, we're at the house, and Kyra was staying in a uh, hotel, and we left the house to take her to the hotel, and I went through a red light. And it just so happened the city police was on the opposite way, watching this dumbass talking to this hot little girl that flew all the way from Fort Lauderdale and went right through this red light. This is late at night. I think it was well past midnight. She was actually in kind of loungewear wear, not street clothes. And I get teased by that. When I take her to the airport, about half the time, I'm so busy talking to her, I miss the turn off to go to the airport. Very simple mistakes. We laugh about it. And this is, and I naturally, I didn't make the mistake. She distracted me. But, you know, we have fun with it. And those are
Uh,
simple.
what if it's something a little bit more than missing a turn to the airport?
Well, and that's the thing is as the mistakes become more significant, it's more than just an apology. It's more than making up for it, in my view. It is figuring out what you did wrong and taking the steps not to make that mistake. And that takes a lot of hard conversation. And it's very important that we learned when we are what I call in conflict. because that's really what it is. It's a moment of conflict where the relationship is facing a moment where it can melt down and go into total chaos, or you guide yourself through these troubled waters. And when we are in conflict, and something that I learned even long before Kyra came into my life, is we put the problem, whatever it is, on the other side of us. We look at the problem. Okay, what happened? You did this. I did this. This happened. That happened. And then we kind of look at it. Well, that happened. I felt this. And I look at it. I'm the one, made the mistake. Well, when that happened, I was thinking this and I was feeling this, or I understood this. And we do a real cut to the core, peel back that onion, and it's hard. It's not going to be easy, but you can never lose sight of the us because, as I said earlier, we do what's best for us. And having the hard conversations are necessary for a better us. When you're feeling emotional, maybe we have to step away, take a moment to breathe. Um, we all have our different styles. I get mad, I'm a ranter raver. And then I gotta get rid of these emotions in me. And I have to go and do something. I gotta yell, scream. And then once I get through that, then I can sit down and have a very rational conversation. Kyra is a thinker, for example. She needs time to process all the things, whether they're whatever they are. She's a very logical person. Alandra is probably the best of the two of us of just letting things go. She just she just has this way of focusing on what matters and avoiding all the noise. She's kind of someone I try to emulate and to be more like in that regard. The other side of it, though, is getting her emotions and her thoughts out is very difficult because she's a woman of very few words. She doesn't want the spotlight on her. She's probably cringing right now that I'm even talking about her.
It's adorable. I mean, the fact you missed the turn because you were talking to her, distracted. I mean, I don't know. That's almost like a movie scene or something, right? In some romance movie. I think it's adorable.
Oh, she's probably read just about every romance book alive.
So it sounds like I'm gonna try to condense a lot of this, at least thus far. It sounds like the way you utilize collaboration is by making that third entity, and it allows you to more objectively view whatever may be going on, good, bad, or ugly, right? Because now you're not necessarily just thinking about yourself or herself, you're thinking about eh, the whole, right? I think how I've understood a lot of this is by having that third part of your relationship of the us, it's allowed you to step back, remove yourself as the individual, focus mainly on that us.
It really helps us pull us out of our ego and out of our heads because the us exists with all three of our input. So I can't make a decision for us unless I have the feedback, opinions, and views of my two ladies as well. And one of the things I've learned, both in my professional career and my personal, is that when, as a leader, you bring this new information, new perspectives, it changes your own. You will look at that mountain from a little bit different perspectives. It's still a mountain, but you see it a little bit differently than the way you saw it from your own view.
I'm gonna circle back a little. Actually, it kind of touches on that study. If you don't mind, maybe if you would email that tomorrow or whatever. I don't know, it's getting late. Um, but I'd be interested in looking into that study because one of the questions that I had was what kind of safeguards as leaders put into place to prevent any kind of coercion or unethical strategies during these collaboration um discussions. And it sounds like that there might already be some evidence that good leader is naturally did to, I believe, the word was to take cooperative approaches over coercive. What are your thoughts?
Well, I used to believe that character was what kept you from taking these unethical or coercive. But I just read a book here not long ago about belonging, and it was very much about the effect that the need to belong, to feel connected with other people, and the environment that we exist in, how it can, regardless of the character, it can shift us. It's very, that, think of it, you know, uh, taking off in Los Angeles and heading to New York, but you're off by 1 degree, which is ironic because it
In
came,
Florida.
yeah, well, not quite, but you're not going to be going to New York, and the further you go, the further off course you're going to be, all because of the environment. The environment that you establish in your dynamic is incredibly important. Um, I'll give you a professional event where there was a time we had a general manager that was highly coercive, authoritarian, and developed a very powerful fear structure from the top down. And I had a crew that made a cardinal mistake. When that event happened, they thought they were fired. And then they took further violations, serious violations, to try to cover the first one up. It was by only by chance that all of it was discovered, all because of the environment of fear, heavy handedness, uh, a environment. So, I know people like some people really like punishment. And if punishment in that dynamic is balanced, fair, consistent, there's not a problem. But if there's a lack of consistency, if it's out of balance with the crime, you're going to develop a culture of fear. And even you don't even have to have punishment. I had a situation here not long ago where the ladies struggled to share something with me, and it was a serious problem. And I think they stewed on it for a while before they finally brought it to me, all because they were worried of how mad and upset and angry I was going to be. I was, yeah, I was really upset, but I was more upset that they didn't bring it to me right away than the actual problem. But in the mess of those emotions, it's hard to tell what's what. I stepped away after and I remembered what happened with this crew that I had who did get fired. And I fought for a month and a half to get their jobs back because I felt their actions were based out of fear, not who their what their character was. So, long story short, it's very important you consider the environment you're creating, and it's so easy to let it slip. You have to understand your own faux pas, if you will, or your handicaps as a leader. I'm very emotional. I'm very passionate in my emotions. And if I'm not careful, that can have a imprint on the girls that I don't see necessarily. We have a process that I started a long time ago where they are to come to me and say, I have something to tell you and I don't know how to say it. It's basically, you're going to be upset. So sit down, shut up, and listen. And it's to warn me that I need to grab hold of my emotions and listen. And so there's that thing. Look at your own handicaps, your own flaws, and be honest about them. And then look at ways to correct them.
Has been very powerful for me. Um, and that also has emotional responsive, reactive, or however you want to say that in the past. Something that's been really big for me is that I don't get angry. I'm not angry. Dustin, right? I'm not angry. Sometimes I have anger in me. Anger doesn't define me. Just like sometimes I have joy in me. Joy doesn't define me. I'm Dustin. And I think there was another way I heard it framed that her or an emotion is an event, right? for me, just like you, sometimes, like, if somebody says something that's upsetting, I need 5 minutes. And at this point in my journey, I'm conscious enough, and most often, I'm mindful enough to ask for that, or more so, tell them, "I need 5 minutes. You need to walk away from me. Come back and check in 5 minutes, see where I'm at," right? Um, and I think that it's something I've gotten from conversation is that how you and your ladies process upsets, problems, slightly different, but you have find how each one of you guys do it. That goes back into that collaborative effort. Or I can't remember which one of your ladies says you said that needed more time to think. And then the other one seemed to just process it fast, right? I find myself after that 5 minutes of that, I need to emotionally cool down. I'm like, all right, let's fix it. Let's get into this. But if I was with someone that needed that time to think and process it, that's not going to be a good path for me to take to leave whatever the transgression or the problem was. Um, so that was a really good takeaway from some of this discussion. Um, and I think another thing that's worth noting is it's okay to get upset. It's okay to get sad. How you allow or that upset have an impact on the world around you, right? How you process that upset, right? If you need to go outside and yell and scream, I don't see necessarily a problem with that as long as you're not yelling and individual. I kind of see a problem with that personally. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get on a soapbox. But I definitely really do appreciate that you brought to light on that. And the last thing that I kind of want to touch um with your last statement is in my experience, there's sometimes where I found that my type they think I'm upset, they don't know I'm upset. I have a very overarching rule, don't think. This is where I
Hmm.
pretty adamant, you ask me, and I'm just gonna be pretty blunt here, not my S types don't have the authority to determine if I'm upset or not. Didn't give them that authority. I really don't know if anybody ever has the authority to control someone else's emotion. Um, that's a fantasy world that we live in. Um, but more so, like for me, it's been important to establish communication, whether it be verbal or nonverbal, to communicate if they may think that I'm upset. Sounds like you've established some similar things,
Yeah,
protocols.
yeah, we have a protocol, and it specifically came into development and in part of our process with Kyra. Kyra is deeply sensitive to emotions. She feels very deeply and is very in tuned to my emotions, probably more than I am of myself. So when she senses that I am tense, upset, whatever, she has the protocol to come and ask me, "Are you upset at me?" Another one that they use when they realize I'm kind of quote unquote bitchy, not that I ever am, uh, they, uh, they ask, "Are you hungry?" And it makes me stop and think. One of the things I've learned about emotions, they can be there and you're not necessarily aware how they're affecting your behavior. You can be short. You can be a little abrasive. You can be a little, and these little slights, these little behaviors, oh, something's to burr up his ass today. And so if it affects Kyra, which very seldom does it ever affect Alandra, he says, oh, fucking asshole. She goes on and does her thing. But Kyra goes and she feels it and says, are you mad at me? And no, and then oh shit. I'm just thinking about this or that, and I didn't realize I was getting. I apologize. Thank you for asking me. And that's where I found. Yeah, I must admit it's been a long time since she's actually asked me that, and a lot of that is because developing mindfulness skills and working on it, meditation, has been very useful for me to getting very present in the now and being self-aware of how I'm behaving right this moment, how I'm feeling right this moment, and what I'm thinking this moment, and how all three are tied together. But there's no question, 30 years ago, I'm just amazed Alandra stayed.
Well, all of this is about growth. As relationship, I think there's been. I'm not gonna. I would speculate there's been same three parts of growth. You have grown as an individual. Alandra has grown as an individual, but then as us, I would. I'd almost speculate that the us has seen exponential comparative. I mean, because when I'm thinking from collaboration and when I look at it as like my professional work, when people really collaborate, they have the ability to accomplish so much more together than they ever would as individuals. And the sum of them as in when they work together, they have the ability to just create
They gotta
something that
they gotta believe in the vision. They gotta have a plan and a realistic plan of how they're going to meet their vision. And they got to believe in and have a self responsibility in their and a clarity of what their role is in working towards that. And I found that as applied in my personal life as it has in my professional life. And it's absolutely incredible what you can achieve.
I agree. Um, I think a good question to kind of like round out this entire conversation, um, is what do you what are some of the most important things that people should keep collaborating follower once again specifically long term?
That's a, you know, there's so much, and just pulling something. I think probably the most important, whether you're on the left side or the right side, and maybe even more important on the right side, your well being matters. Your identity matters. Your authenticity into the process has to be there Otherwise, it corrupts the entire process. You cannot fake who you are. You got to be who you are. You can't pretend to be something you're not because it under it will corrupt the whole process. So, like
That
transparency is really important to us in that regard.
I think transparency is leads into a lot of these big, a lot of key. But to go back to the first important thing that you recommended for leader followers, I'm gonna attach a word and sort of cliche, but maybe not. It's authenticity, right? You have to be yourself. If you're not genuinely a dominant person, no matter how hard you force it, you'll never actually be that. Can you develop skills? Can you learn, some of that? But if it's not to the core of who you are, you're not going to read those couple hundred books that are behind you on how to develop leadership skills, communications, various other interpersonal skills. I get a lot of people asking me, like, well, how did you do this? I'm like, you want to be an overnight success? Work 10 years, right? You don't see all that effort behind it.
Well,
But
as you're talking there, I realize there's one word, and I don't even know if we use it in this entire conversation. It's a word people throw around like crazy. That word is trust. And I don't use that word in general because to me, trust is the result. Everything we do brings trust. And when we have trust, it's a result of all what we have done. But I don't work for trust. I don't do all these things for trust. I do things for the vision of us. Trust is a byproduct of all the things we do to get to that vision of what us is. And being able to articulate what that us is and being able to set out how you're going to work towards that is to me even more important than working for some trust. Because trust doesn't necessarily get us to us. It comes along for the ride.
those are some very powerful words. The ones I wrote down were trust is as a result or trust is a byproduct. Wow, I'm gonna have to sit with that for a second because that's powerful. And we talked about like trust is earned or trust is given. I even like this. I have this. It's a SpongeBob quote. It says, "Trusting you is my choice. Proving me wrong is your decision." Even though I like that, it still goes back into like kind of what you just said that trust is a result of prior, right? It's I don't want to voice many thoughts on it yet because I got to think about this, but I really appreciate that thought. That for me that was pretty powerful. Probably a reason why we didn't touch on trust. I don't think many of our conversations we've talked about it much. I think that
No,
one of those words that's just thrown around too much that it's been diluted as far as the definition.
Well, it's like love, trust, duty, honor. Those words don't mean nothing if you can't put articulate how you live it.
One that makes out something that a lot of what we do is based off of our word. It- And something that I've said many a times is dollar doesn't bind a slave to me, their word does. Dollar is just a physical representation of the word.
I look at words as like a measuring stick. Words establish how I can measure action by. So if you tell me that you are going to do X, that tells me what action to expect. And I will measure your actual actions based on your words. So, in the sense of collaboration, it's a fancy word, but how does that look? What does that look like? And then what is our actual actions in the doing? That's where it's very important to define and be able to articulate what the us looks like. And I talk about vision, but vision is not a goal. Okay, it's more like a north star that you're moving towards. It keeps you going, and it's more like a principle that you live to. And our basic principle, our motto, and is we are one, which is the us. And what does us look like? Part of us is we are a power and authority dynamic relationship. I am the head of that. I make the fundamental decisions. We have a cooperative, transparent process within our dynamic that we share everything. And I mean everything. There, any conversation I have with anyone may be shared with Alandra and Kyra, and vice versa. We won't share it outside of us, but as the ladies, even raising our children, when they told them this is what you're going to do, that was as good as me telling them that's what they're going to do. Because our kids we raised 4 kids, and they all knew dad's the boss. And when they got old enough, they also knew that we were kinky. They have this special room that we never go in. Uh, but, you know, figuring out what the us looks like in a collaboration is a process. And it's a living, breathing person. It's not stagnant. Who we were 15 years ago is definitely not who we are today. Uh, we have health issues now that we didn't have 15 years ago. So as life comes and we change, us is changing. And that's why there's a lot of open communication. We're talking all the time. Uh, Before Christmas, I actually started a process. I just got our cottage all really well done and done up. And I wanted, besides play, I wanted to, uh, we go in there every Wednesday and we have a conversation about whatever, but it's about us. And it's an undistracted time for us. And we never did that before. We never had a planned moment to have that conversation or a conversation ever. So the us changed suddenly. Not even sure why.
Because it was your will, right?
Yeah, well, our world changed, and maybe because I'm retired and I'm bored.
There you go. I understand that sometimes, especially since I was able to retire so young. I do have a little bit extra time that allows me to read a little bit more, focus on various other. Um, I just want to say, wow, I'm taken back by this conversation. Transparency. I was a little nervous last few days of I've had like a high cognitive load. We kind of talked about that a little bit. I wasn't sure how this conversation was. I don't know exactly why because we've had a lot of good, really great conversations, in my opinion. Um, it definitely went better than I could have imagined if there wasn't the nervousness, my cognitive. Um, they provoked some thoughts I had, and even potentially how I word myself future. And it's funny how how set get into any one thing, and then I hear a thought, an idea. No longer I'm that set in that. This has been a hard evolution for me as a person because I'm very structured. I'm very rigid in many ways. I built a career on it. Biggest thing that I learned last year, well, I guess in 2022, I hiked the Sierra Nevada mountains, 280 some miles or whatever. I think 13 mountain passes and the highest mountain this in the lower 48. I had 3 different itineraries this trip, right? In case like planned for everything, elevation. Didn't take me 24 hours to realize that my plan, no matter what, work and I needed that adaptability. And I think that that has been crucial for my development over the last few years is that I'm not the same Dustin as I was last year or 5 years ago or so on and so forth. Think of this story, and you kind of touched on it, is there was a lady that was interviewed and she was married to the same man for, I don't know, 65 years or something, whatever the story was. And the interviewer asked her what it was like to be years. And she, oh, you're silly. I've been married to 13 different men, or whatever the answer was. And I think that a big thing that just sum up my thought here I got from you is it sounds like not only is like communication really important, um, but the adaptability and the acceptance that you individuals are gonna change, and you as an us is gonna.
Adaptability is a, without a doubt, a fundamental characteristics for collaboration on all sides, leader or follower. Uh, because you as an individual can't see every aspect in every possible way. And sure enough, another person is going to throw something at you, and it's going to, you know, I still remember when Alandra told me, "I will share you." You know, this was before we shared our vows in June 1990, and it rocked my world. I never imagined about being in a poly dynamic ever. It just did not register to me. And it took 10 years for me to wrap my brain around and adapt. And it was the hardest thing I ever had to adapt to. It turned out to be the most rewarding.
100%. That my life has changed. I've allowed more adaptability into my life. This is a topic that I'm sure we can get really far in. And for the sake of time, we've been talking for an hour and 45 minutes. Is there any final thoughts that you may have that you'd like to share before we do wrap up?
Um, one, thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion, because having these discussions help not just communicate my ideas, but it helps me think through my ideas as well. And if you're able to articulate what you believe, the better you are to articulate it, the better you have faith and belief in what you're talking about. I'm grateful to anyone that is going to listen, watch this podcast, and if they have any questions specifically towards me, feel free to contact me on that Night of Miss, or you can email directly to me, markknight1965 at gmail.com. And I'm happy to have these conversations. If you have suggestions, uh, things that happen in your life, your experiences, I'm passionate about being better tomorrow than I am today.
I think that's a big reason, even though we're in, there's a generation, a big connect, at least acquaintances, potentially even friends over the last year or two, is that shared vision of um, continual growth. Um, I just want to say I appreciate your time. I appreciate your experience, offered not only just us tonight, individual through all our various conversations. And for our listeners, I'll go ahead and update the show notes. Now that Mark has went ahead and given out his contact information, but he does want to reach out directly, they can. And um, I'd encourage it. I know I've had some great conversations, hopefully many more. So that is it for tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed it. We got an exciting month next month. Events tomorrow and sharing on pet life. Um, exciting things coming. So I think all I have. Take care.